Welcome to the Pathways to Success. I'm Julian Placino, recruiting professional turned success speaker, show host, and media entrepreneur. This show is dedicated to helping you find your unique pathway to success by having conversations that educate, inspire, and transform. Together, we'll interview some of the world's greatest leaders and uncover their secrets to success. Thanks for tuning in, and on to the show. Welcome to episode 212 of the Pathways to Success, where we help you find your unique pathway to success by having conversations with inspiring leaders about their business and keys to success. I'm Julian Placino, your host, and we have a great show in store for you today. Today's episode is sponsored by City Central. City Central offers innovative workspaces for your business to thrive. Make sure to use the promo code PATHWAYS for 50% off your first 3 months. So check out City Central at citycentral.com. It is my pleasure to welcome CEO at Eden Green Technology, Eddy Badrina. Eddy, welcome to the Pathways to Success. How are you, sir?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it is great to have you here. And as I mentioned before we started rolling here, I'm surprised we haven't met sooner given our mutual points of contact with Cameron, who was on the show, James Loomstein. Shout out to James if you're watching over at Rogue. And you were also featured on the Bottle Rocket podcast.
Yes. I have no idea how we have not met before, but I'm certainly glad we have now.
And you're my fellow Filipino brother. My mother's watching right now, so Mom, thanks for watching. Yeah. Well, Eddy, you are the CEO at Eden Green Technology. Help us with some context. What is Eden Green Technology?
So Eden Green is a platform, if you will. We call it Greenhouse as a Service. So we will build turnkey manage, and license greenhouses to investors, and to research institutions, to universities, to cities and municipalities, for the sole express reason of feeding as many people as we can in a very small footprint of space. So in 1.5 acres of a greenhouse, you will get just a little under 2 million pounds of leafy greens over the course of a year in 11 to 13 harvests. It kind of sounds crazy because it is. It really is. It's the next gen of agriculture. We've seen such a huge demand for our product, both in terms of the greens as well as the greenhouses themselves, because especially after the pandemic, just this unbelievable disruption of the supply chain. Mm-hmm. And so we want to take all those farms that are way out there in California and then bring them right next to the population that needs it the most.
Fascinating. So what exactly is the product? Is it the greenhouse? Is it the crop like you mentioned? What exactly is it?
So it's two parts. One is actually the greenhouse itself. Mm-hmm. So the technology within our greenhouses, they're huge 18-foot vertical towers. Those are actually patented here in the United States and around the world. So no one else can do what we do literally. Mm-hmm. And that is patented for design and usage, but it's encapsulated within 1.5 acre greenhouse. And so that greenhouse plus all the technology in it, that's what we are selling. Now, the product of it is produce. It could be lettuce, kale, arugula, leafy greens, any herbs, and even some strawberries. That produce that comes out of it is what the companies or the institutions or the organizations that buy these greenhouses then go and sell into the marketplace, either to another grower or to a retailer or even to a grocery store themselves for their private label.
Got it. So that's what I wanted to find out. Who is your customer for this?
Yeah. So our customer is twofold. I'll say there's our customer, mm-hmm. and then there's our end consumer. The customer is actually those organizations or those companies that want to, or those institution funds that want to buy our greenhouses and set up shop, like a franchise model, if you will.
Sure. Okay.
Right. Those are our customers. They see the revenue opportunities. They see the profit margins there. They also see how it affects the community around them. What they're producing is actually feeding the community in an accessible way. And then they see the environmental, sustainable, and governmental, called ESG component of these greenhouses, and they want to invest in these. So they invest in these. We'll build it, we'll manage it for them, much like a multifamily property, right? If you combined a developer, a general contractor, and a property manager all rolled into one, that's what we are for these greenhouses. And then we will actually even help them sell that produce. It's called offtake in our industry, sell that offtake into stores, into other brands that need it.
Interesting. So for the complete novice when it comes to agricultural technology, what would you say to them is the problem that you are solving?
The problem we're solving is actually a distribution problem. So unbeknownst to a lot of people, 1/3 of all of the United States produce comes out of one valley in California, the Central Valley in California.
1/3 of it?
1/3 of it.
Comes from one valley in California?
Yes. And then 90% of all lettuce, which we eat, it's an $8 billion industry just in lettuce alone. 90% of that comes from one valley in California. Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Salinas Valley in California. That's it. So when you have a pandemic that then throttles the supply chain, and then you've got weather patterns, wildfires, droughts, problems with labor shortages out there, it affects everyone in the rest of the country. Right? Because we're having to take all of that produce and transport it up to 2,500 miles, 2,000 miles to here, to the East Coast, in order for people just to get lettuce. So if you go into a Chipotle or you go into a Chick-fil-A or a number of others, from time to time you will see, especially in the last 2 years, you will see a shortage. The signs will say, apologies, we are out of lettuce. It's because something happened in the Salinas Valley 60 days prior. It's that intense of a supply chain. So what we're trying to solve for is how do we get all of that produce, get the demand for all of that, at least lessen the demand and bring it from 2,000 miles away to 20 miles away or to 2 miles away from the consumer. What that does is it unlocks a number of things. One, when you reduce that supply chain, it unlocks revenue that's lost due to just logistics, right? Revenue lost to waste. If it's sitting in the supply chain, it's a perishable item. By some accounts, our industry, not just lettuce, but the overall produce industry, they work in 30 to 40% loss into the price of the greens that you buy or the apples that you buy. Literally 30% loss. I don't know any other industry where that's remotely acceptable, but somehow in the ag industry it is. So if you can reduce that supply chain and fix that distribution problem, you are unlocking a lot of different things, the most of which is accessibility to greens for not just the high-end Whole Foods, high-end restaurants, but for everyone. Accessibility, year-round consistency, because we're no longer relying on weather patterns, right? It's winter and the harvest is less, or you have to go to different places. So consistency, and then food safety. When it's not sitting in that distribution and supply chain as long, then you're just getting fresher food that's less prone and less exposed to bacteria, salmonella, listeria. Right?
Interesting. So it's becoming more clear to me that it is twofold. It's the technology, it's solving for the distribution aspect, and also the produce itself. I'm curious, as far as the crop, the produce, is there something about your technology that allows it to grow more fruitfully or better? Tell us about that.
So yeah, if you look at those 18-foot towers, and I would encourage your audience, if they have a chance, to go to eatinggreen.com. But if you look at those towers, what's actually patented is the little cups around it with each of the plants. They're called plant spots. But the patent around the design and usage of that plant spot is how it's fed and then how air is handled to it. So we call it a microclimate technology. So we're taking the climate of all around the plants and shrinking it, and we're only concerned about that 12-inch radius around each plant spot. So a couple of things amazing about that shrinkage. When you shrink it, it would be like as if you and I were in the studio, or your audience at home, instead of having their whole house or apartment HVAC conditioned, they only had a little backpack around them. So in the heat of a Dallas summer, it's 85, 90 degrees in the apartment, but it's 65 just around you. Now think about the cost savings, right? Because you're not conditioning the whole space. So now multiply that by 300,000, which is the amount of plant spots in one of our greenhouses, and you get the net effect. You have all these little plants with just the right amount of airflow, of water temperature, the nutrients in the water. Everything around it is just perfect, and everything else is, call it secondary ambient environment. Super, super efficient, but also very, very localized and focused on and optimized for each plant. So what you end up getting is a plant that grows quicker. We have 11 to 13 harvests a year. So literally a lettuce will only stay in our system for 25, 28 days, and then it's done. And it's ready to go into the stores. You get it quicker, the nutrient profile, and then the taste profile of each green is unbelievable. If you compared, for instance, my kids are so spoiled by me bringing greens home all the time.
Yeah.
They'll taste ours, and then everything else tastes like cardboard to them.
Yeah.
And it's because the plants are getting what they need, when they need it, and exactly how much they need it. So they're super optimized for taste, for nutrition, and then for the look. So that's the magic behind our technology.
Interesting. So what is the vision and the fullest execution of what Eden Green wants to bring into the world? Why is the world a better place?
So our vision is to have, and I'm a technology background guy, and so our vision is to have a mesh network of greenhouses all around the nation that we're able to then redefine what locally grown means, right? If we can redefine locally grown nationally, what ends up happening is there are people whose lives are fundamentally changed because their diets are changing, because they can afford, instead of, and we've all had that experience. You go buy greens and there's this like switch that goes off in your mind of, okay, if I buy this for $3 or $3.50, I've got to eat it in 2 days or it's going to go bad. And for a lot of people, they don't think about that decision, but it really does affect their diet, because if they can't afford that much, or if their dollar has to be stretched farther for their family's budget, they're going to second guess that decision to get greens, and instead they may get a processed food that will last longer. They know it'll stay in the pantry longer, and so it's just an economic decision, right? But if all of a sudden they know intrinsically, hey, I can buy these greens, they're actually going to last in my refrigerator up to 3 weeks, which ours do, partially because of the unbelievable nutrient profile, but also too, it's because it was harvested 2 days ago instead of a week ago. All of a sudden that changes their decision making. That's a fundamental difference in what they are eating, what their kids are eating. Then it changes their whole life, right? When they're starting to intake more and more greens, and that decision making of $3 of fresh produce versus $3 of processed food, that goes away. Then it just becomes a decision of, do I want to eat healthier or not? It's no longer a matter of perishability. It's no longer a matter of, going to waste or just tasting like crud, right?
Yeah.
You're actually able to make a good decision about your health and about your nutrition.
I love that. Well, Eddy, before we jump into your keys to success and learning how you have led your life in a way uniquely to create the results you have, share with us this. You've had an incredible career. You've founded companies, you worked for the White House, you did all these things, and you could choose the direction of your career. Why are you so personally passionate about this particular mission and cause with Eating Green? Tell us that.
So I was drawn to Eating Green. It's a two-part sort of answer. The first is, as I was coming off my last company, and I had run it with my business partner, Cameron, we sold it and then we bought it back again. But as we bought it back, I really had a chance to think, like many entrepreneurs do, okay, what do I want to do with my career now, right? And I'm in the second half of my career. I'm 45, so I've really got, I've got the second half of my life ahead of me, and I had just the gift to be able to take a step back and think, what do I want to do with that? And three things came to mind over the course of, call it a year. One is I wanted to run a hardware software company. I had been there, done that, and gotten the M&A t-shirt for professional services, right? Two is I wanted to see an exponential impact from my level of effort. So specifically, for every 1 unit of effort that I give, could be an hour, could be some sort of other unit, but for every 1 unit of effort that I give, I want to see a 10 to 20x return on culture and on the society around me. And that, that is personal to me. Everyone has their own sort of gauge on how they want to be successful or how they define success. And for me, it's that exponential return. And I just started to think about my intellectual capital as just that, as capital. And anyone who invests capital wants to see a return, right? So that was the second piece. And then the third piece is I wanted to run what's called a redemptive organization. So there's a company, an organization, a nonprofit called Praxis Labs up in New York City, and they espouse this redemptive framework for nonprofits and for-profit companies, for entrepreneurs and for investors. And it's this idea that most companies are exploitative, leaders eat first, employees are treated unfairly, and culture and society are negatively affected because of it. There are some companies that are ethical, and we know a number of them. Been graced to work for a number of them, right? Ethical companies are where leaders eat alongside their employees, employees are treated fairly, and society around it is either neutral or is even advanced because these ethical companies exist. But but we think there's a better way, and that's a redemptive company. And a redemptive company is where leaders eat last. They're sacrificial. It's where employees are not just treated fairly, they're treated generously. And it's where culture and society is not just advanced because of this organization's existence, but it's actually renewed and redeemed and restored. And so I wanted to run or be a part of a redemptive organization. So I took all three of those things, those check boxes, if you will,
right,
and I just sat on them. And there are three things I had to do with those three check boxes. One is I had to be able to articulate it very clearly to myself and then to others, but more importantly to myself. Just like I'm talking with you right now, I was able to articulate and clearly define what I wanted. A lot of entrepreneurs cannot do that, and it holds them back from true success, whatever that success may be, because they don't know how to define success. They don't have those check boxes, and more importantly, they can't articulate it to themselves with confidence. So I had to articulate those three things. Second, I had to throw them back to my community, my close friends, my colleagues, my mentors, just a close group of business leaders that I have that I count as friends, trusted friends. And I just threw it back to them and said, hey, is this coming from a healthy place? Or is this coming from, what the Bible says, selfish ambition and vain conceit? Because if it's that, tell me, and I won't pursue it any further. But if it's coming from a healthy place, then I know I'm onto something. And so those three check boxes filtered through friends and colleagues. And lastly, I had to let it go. And I'm a man of faith. And so I said, all right, God, you've put this on my heart, but I've got to let it, I've got to trust you that it's going to actually come to completion. Because every time I try to force things, it just doesn't help. It's not healthy. So, I had to just let it go and see what came back. So because I had, shared that with friends and colleagues and was open about it with them, they started coming back to me with like, oh, you should take a look at this, or you should take a look at this, or you should take a look at this. And one of my friends, a banker, came and said, hey, there's this company, great vision, great mission, needs some help, needs a go-to-market strategy, needs a guy with vision who can run companies and take them to market, and they need you. They need your help. So I took a look at the company, and that's the other part of the equation. So I had defined all of those things. On the other side, the founders, Jacques and Eugene, who invented the technology, their hearts are so pure, and they invented the tech literally because they saw a 5-year-old boy hoarding candy that they were giving away in South Africa. And they stopped and they said, hey, why is he hoarding candy? And the teacher said, it's actually because it's not his day to eat. It's his 3-year-old sister's day to eat. So he's taking it back to his sister. Wow. And they said, man, this is not right. We have to do something about it. So their story and the origination of the technology really drew me into it. And so it was just a combination of knowing what I wanted and then matching it up and matching it up with, the company and the vision that was already there. And so it was, I tell friends, it was the easiest hard decision I ever made to take a step back from BuzzShift and trust it in Cameron's and the leadership team's care and then go run this.
Wow. You know why I was smiling that entire time? Because I was vibing with so many different things that you said. I share your worldview from a Christian perspective, the entrepreneurial perspective, and just like, it was so methodical of how you decided that this is the right thing, right? Which actually is a perfect segue to the keys to success. And one of those pieces we want to discuss is entrepreneurship. And there's so many questions I could ask about entrepreneurship, but the one thing that you seem to have dialed down is how to arrive at that inspiring vision. So what did you do uniquely to crystallize and have the knowingness of what you actually wanted?
So it's actually ironic. It's what we talked a little bit before the show about, but it was sitting and waiting for that inspiration to come to me. It was doing research. It was really doing what we call heart work. It was finding out what I really wanted, what I was really about, and what I wanted with my life, right? I think so many entrepreneurs are very tactical execution, right? they're goal-oriented, and I'm goal-oriented as well. I want a task, I want to finish it. I want a task, I want to finish it. But the great leaders are the ones that take a step back and say, okay, I'm climbing up this ladder to success, but where's the ladder leaning against? And then where's it going, right? And do I want to be on that ladder? So many people arrive at that point way down in their careers, and they call it a midlife crisis, or they have a total career change. It's because they've spent the vast majority of their lives running up and climbing up the wrong ladder. And it's only when they take a step back, there's some crisis moment, right? They lost their job, or they had a nervous breakdown, or they had some sort of family issue, or whatever it is, that it forced them to take a step back and get a perspective of the landscape, right? Fortunately, I was, just had the opportunity to know proactively to do that before I came to any sort of crisis point. And I was able to take that step back when I was actually in a good place financially with a company that was running and thriving. And instead of just like keep on tactical execution, I just was able to take a step back. And I think, as you climb up, as your audience climbs up in leadership, both in terms of role as well as responsibilities, there's can easily be all of their time taken up or less of their time taken up. And good leaders will delegate to then take up less of their time. And then the question becomes, what do I do with this time? And it goes back to this idea of intellectual capital, right? And I need to write a book on this, but my thought is the thesis of this book, or this just concept, is we are in an information economy. And in an information economy, the capital that matters is actually the intellectual capital. And we all have intellectual capital machines right up here and right up there, right? Those machines only run for so long. And there's a point in time in which those machines are primed for output. And then there's a point in time where it's a little premature, and then there's a point in time where they start to slow down, right? And we try to stave off the slowing down as much as we can, right? But if you look at your brains and the person that you are as an intellectual capital machine, and if you take an investor mindset to it, then you're all of a sudden going to think, okay, how do I optimize, one, the machine to produce that capital, and then two, once that capital is out there, how do I multiply that capital as much as possible? How do I invest it in the wisest way to produce, once it's out of my head, onto a piece of paper or onto a screen, how do I multiply that capital as much as I can? An entrepreneur, the usual sort of language of an entrepreneur is, I'm going to start a business. And then that business is going to make money, and it's going to be passive income, right? The business, the income, the type of income are all just manifestations of your intellectual capital. The intellectual capital rises above all the rest, and I would argue that intellectual capital is 1,000 times more valuable than that actual business or that actual passive income. Because if you think about, people who are just solely dialed in, and they, all these YouTube and influencers on passive income, right? Whether it's through real estate or through owning businesses, what does that passive income allow you to do? It allows you to take a step back and not work on that. Well, then what are you going to do now? A smart person would say, well, I've just let that one go. I'm going to put my brain, my intellectual capital machine, towards another thing. And I'm going to build a business out of that, and I'm going to let that run. And then sometimes I want to rest. Right? And a lot of the folks love the luxury, and the luxury of time, and the luxury of things, right? All that's really doing is, if they're smart about it, all that's really doing is encouraging their intellectual capital machine to grow. They're cultivating it, right? That's why LeBron spends $1 million a year on his body, because his body is his capital machine for a season. Mm-hmm. Same thing. We have to invest in our capital machines while they're at their prime. And you do that by creating time. And you create time by creating multiple streams of income that allow you to not work on the business or in the business, but work on it, right? The E-Myth deal. So that's how I think about how I get to the places that I am, what I'm pursuing, the people that I spend time with, the books that I read, all the media that I intake or don't intake. It's because I'm focused on this capital machine. And so when you ask like, hey, the original question of, okay, how did you come to this crystallized sort of deal? I think I came to it very purposely because I allowed myself the ability to take a step back and let that new idea come, let that new inspiration come, and then filter it through friends and family to see if it's worth pursuing or not. That's where the other way that entrepreneurs go wrong is they operate in a silo. Mm-hmm. They don't bounce that idea off of anyone, their spouse, their friends, or anyone. And so then they think it's a good idea, and they've got an echo chamber of one, and then they look online, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that they look all of it up, and yeah, that seems like a successful thing to do, so I'll go do it. They go run down that route. They may be successful, but what have they given up? Or they run down that route, and it's a nightmare, and it's a financial disaster, and they're like, what went wrong? Well, you didn't have people around you to tell you the truth, right? And folks, even if it's just one or two other entrepreneurs who can tell you the truth of that is a great idea or that's a bad idea, or you need to think on that more, or yeah, go execute on that right now, but be mindful of what you're spending, right? Those are the folks that you need in your life. Every entrepreneur needs that in their life. Ironically, entrepreneurs are some of the loneliest people I've ever met.
Yeah. There's three things that I'm taking away from that response. Number one is thinking of this as actual intellectual capital. I'm guilty of this, like pure execution. I want that dopamine task of here, seek and destroy, you know what I mean, get it done. Always doing that, right?
Right.
The second piece is allow yourself to have space so you can think, you can decompress, absorb insights, and see exactly what's going on. And the third big piece is surround yourself with wisdom, with wise people who can help you think through it. It's one thing to think it's a good idea. It's another thing to bounce it back and get real market feedback.
Absolutely.
And I think between those things, it can help craft your entrepreneurial vision. I think that's great.
Yes.
So as far as leadership goes, and you have many different perspectives to speak upon this, but if there was just one thing you could share with our audience that you can tell them for sure, if you do this, you are guaranteed to grow as a leader, what is that one thing?
Know yourself. If you know yourself, you're guaranteed to be a great leader. And to expand on that, if you know what you want, if you know why you want it, and if you know, then you know how it will affect everything else around you, and you count the cost, the probability, if you take all three of those into effect, and then say check, 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 and go, the probability of you being a success, however you defined it in one of those things, is going to be higher than most.
And if there's one tactical thing that anyone watching right now can do to increase their self-awareness, what's that one thing?
I would say take a test of some sort, either StrengthsFinders or Enneagram or the DISC profile, right? Culture Index is another thing. Take a tool and use it to honestly get a good, honest reflection of yourself. That is one of the biggest pieces of self-awareness that I think a lot of people have at their disposal for not much money, $30, $40 a test or something like that. But the results, if they take it and don't dismiss it as, especially if they see weaknesses that they don't necessarily like about themselves, but if they can take those and say, okay, here are my strengths, I accept my weaknesses, and I'm going to try to delegate for those and shore those up, but I'm really going to focus on my strengths and be honest about those. I think that's one of the best, easy, tactical things you can do to gain some self-awareness.
I love that. Eddy, the final key to success here, and something that you are passionate about, and I really didn't know where to go with this, but you wanted to talk about fatherhood. Why are you passionate about fatherhood?
I think a lot about legacy now, and maybe it's just my age. I've got a 17-year-old daughter, a 12-year-old son, and an 8-year-old daughter. And my wife and I, we've been married for a little over 20 years, but we're at that age now, we're starting to think about legacy. And some people think about it much earlier, but just for me, legacy means so much more to me now than ever. And one of the best ways to promote your legacy or to have a legacy is through your kids, right? And some people choose not to have kids, and they choose to establish their legacy in other ways, and that's fantastic, and a lot of those are healthy ways. But for me, at least, fatherhood has proven to be the main instrument by which I can leave a legacy. And so as I think about raising the next generation of leaders, right? As I think about self-awareness, my kids have been the biggest reflection of the good and the bad in me. And so fatherhood has actually helped me become a better leader because I'm able to see and hear from them in very honest terms what I'm doing well and what are my blind spots, right? And I hear that every day. But if I can accept the innocence of those comments, of the feedback, and if I can accept those in a healthy way, that actually helps me become a better leader. And so for the folks who do have kiddos and have a chance to, or the willingness or ability to have kids, look at those kids and think, man, they are one of the best ways that I can cultivate my own leadership skills by listening to them, by spending time with them, because they are a great reflection of honestly, who I want to be.
Wow. I love that. Eddy, I want to, first off, this was incredible. There is so much content that we packed in this interview. I want to close with just a few fun kind of lightning round questions for our audience to kind of get to know you just a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then we'll close out here. So, Eddy, what is your favorite food?
Thai food.
Thai food?
Yes, pad ki mao.
Pad ki mao, okay, awesome. What kind of music are you listening to right now?
So I have a greatest rap songs of all times playlist on Spotify.
Yeah.
And it's got a number of followers. And so I'm constantly, I just love listening to rap and hip hop.
Yeah.
Old school, new school, whatever. So that's on my Spotify right now.
I can vibe with that.
Yeah.
When you are watching TV, what inspires you most?
I love sci-fi.
Sci-fi?
Yeah. I have read a lot of the Asimov books, the Robert Jordan. I'm up to speed on the Foundations series on Apple TV Plus. I think it's the ability for guys like Asimov to see so far into the future, the Neil Stephensons of the world, right? To see so far in the future and then to actually make a world out of it and then translate it back to us, I think is absolutely incredible.
Sci-fi. All right. What is something you're really proud of that no one really knows about?
Oh, man. I mean, the rap playlist is pretty stinking awesome. I created on a whim just because I wanted to do that, and then people started following and following and following. Like, oh, this is pretty neat.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's pretty.
Besides fatherhood, that's a close second.
That is a close second. Yeah. I got to check that out, man. Awesome. Well, final question here for you, and Eddy, I think you actually already defined success pretty well for you, but you're talking about legacy. So if you were to help your children formulate their own definition of success, what would you tell them now?
Well, first I would say is they are loved. Like, they need to know that they are loved. I think all entrepreneurs need to know that they are loved. If you can sit in confidence of being loved, it frees you up to do whatever you want, right? Because if you don't, the opposite of love is actually insecurity. And if you're insecure, you're going to do things that are not the healthiest of ways. You're going to do it out of some sort of need to feel more secure. More people feel secure about money, about luxury, about having the right cars, about whatever, even relationships. But if you know that you are and confident that you are loved, it frees you up to define whatever you want in terms of your legacy and success, because it's no longer encumbered by that insecurity. So that's what I try to just communicate to my kids every day in what I do, how I act with them, what I say to them, just spending time with them. They just need to know that they're loved, and their success is going to look way different than mine. And guess what? It's all right. That's what I want them to know.
And I think that is absolutely a great message. Eddy, tell our audience how to connect with you on social, learn more about Eden Green technology. Tell us all that, if you would.
Sure. You can find out about Eden Green technology at edengreen.com. On the socials, it's at Eden Green Tech. And then for me personally, I can be found at my last name.com, badrina.com. Shoot me, there's a form there. You can shoot me any sort of questions or comments on this there. And yeah, I would say those are the best ways to get connected with me, and then more importantly with my company. Eden Green is changing the world, and I would love as many people to be advocates and partners with it.
And we'll make sure to have all of your contact information in the show notes as well. So Eddy, this has been a true pleasure. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And everyone else, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success. As always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Pathways to Success.